My boyfriend Ethan spent months belittling my boring desk job while bragging about his hotshot sales career, calling me a paper pusher who'd never understand real pressure. Last week, I walked into the executive boardroom to lead the company-wide restructuring meeting, and there he sat, pale as a ghost, finally realizing who actually signs off on departmental cuts. Want to know what happened when he discovered his girlfriend wasn't just some low-level admin, but the operations director who now controls his entire division's future? I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I still remember the exact moment I realized my relationship with Ethan Crawford was built on a foundation of lies, or rather, assumptions he never bothered to verify. It was a Tuesday evening in March, and we were having dinner at Rosewood Bistro, this upscale restaurant in downtown Portland that Ethan loved because it made him feel important. He'd just closed a major account, some tech startup looking to upgrade their entire communications infrastructure, and he was riding high on his commission prospects. "Babe, you wouldn't understand the adrenaline rush," he said, cutting into his ribeye with the kind of aggressive confidence that had initially attracted me. "When you're in sales, every day is a battlefield. Not like your desk situation." I took a sip of my wine and smiled. "My desk situation? Yeah, he waved his fork dismissively. "No offense, Luna, but shuffling papers and scheduling meetings isn't exactly high stakes. You clock in at 9, clock out at 5, probably browse social media half the day. It's comfortable, safe." This wasn't the first time Ethan had characterized my work this way. Over the 8 months we'd been dating, he'd developed an entire narrative about my career that I'd never bothered to correct. When we first met at a mutual friend's wedding, he'd asked what I did for a living, and I'd given him the simplest possible answer. "I work in operations at Cascade Solutions." Technically true. Catastrophically incomplete. What I didn't tell him, because first dates aren't exactly the time to flex your corporate credentials, was that I was the Director of Operations for Cascade Solutions, entire Western region, overseeing 17 departments, managing an operational budget of $340 million, and reporting directly to the COO. At 32 years old, I was the youngest person to hold this position in the company's 40-year history, but Ethan had heard operations and apparently translated it to administrative assistant or maybe data entry clerk. And honestly, I'd let him believe it, not out of dishonesty but out of exhaustion. In my previous relationship, my career had been a constant source of tension. My ex-boyfriend Marcus couldn't handle that I out-earned him, that my phone rang at odd hours with genuine emergencies, that I sometimes had to cancel plans because a facility crisis in Seattle or a logistics nightmare in Sacramento demanded my immediate attention. He'd called me married to the job so many times it became a tired refrain, and when we finally broke up, his parting shot was that I'd never find a real relationship until I learned to prioritize people over spreadsheets. So when I met Ethan, charming, confident, seemingly secure in himself, I'd made a conscious decision to downplay my professional life. I wanted to be seen as Luna Martinez the person, not Luna Martinez the corporate executive. I wanted someone who'd fall for me, not for my title or my salary or my corner office with the view of Mount Hood. The irony, of course, is that Ethan fell for a version of me that didn't actually exist. "Earth to Luna," Ethan said, snapping his fingers in front of my face. "You zoned out. Long day of... What do you even do all day? Filing? Emails?" "Something like that," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. He grinned, apparently satisfied with this non-answer. "See, that's what I love about you. You're so low maintenance. No ego, no drama. Not like some of these corporate women who act like they're changing the world because they run a department or whatever." I nearly choked on my wine. "You okay?" he asked. "Fine. It just went wrong." Ethan launched back into his sales war stories, and I let him talk while my mind wandered to the meeting I'd had that afternoon. Cascade Solutions was implementing a major restructuring initiative, something I'd been architecting for the past 6 months. The company had grown rapidly through acquisitions, But the integration had been messy, leaving us with redundant roles, conflicting processes, and efficiency ratings that made our investors nervous. My task was to streamline everything, consolidate departments, eliminate redundancies, optimize workflows, and yes, make some very difficult decisions about headcount reductions. It was the kind of high-wire act that could make or break a career. Success would likely fast-track me to VP. Failure would make me the scapegoat for whatever financial shortfalls followed. The restructuring would affect every division in the Western region, including sales, specifically the enterprise sales division where Ethan worked as a senior account executive. He had no idea. And then Johnson, this middle management type, tries to tell me how to close a deal, Ethan was saying. Guy probably hasn't been in the field in 10 years. All these paper pushers think they understand sales strategy because they read some reports. I murmured, suppressing a smile. Here's what Ethan also didn't know. His division was underperforming. Badly. Despite having some of the highest-paid sales staff in the company, enterprise sales was missing targets by 20 to 30% quarter over quarter. Their expense ratios were astronomical. Client entertainment, travel budgets, team-building events that looked more like fraternity parties from the expense reports I'd reviewed. Meanwhile, our mid-market sales team, with a third of the budget, was exceeding projections with a lean, hungry approach that enterprise sales mocked as grinding and unsophisticated. The data didn't lie. Enterprise sales was bloated, complacent, and coasting on relationships that were starting to age out. In the restructuring plan currently sitting on my password-protected laptop, I'd recommended consolidating enterprise and mid-market under a single leadership structure, eliminating 3 management positions and reducing the enterprise team by 40%. It wasn't personal. It was mathematics, but it was definitely going to be uncomfortable. "You know what your problem is?" Ethan said, pointing his fork at me with mock seriousness. "You're too comfortable. You need to take some risks, push yourself. Maybe I could talk to some people, see if there are any entry-level sales roles opening up. Get you out from behind that desk?" I set down my wine glass carefully. "That's really thoughtful, Ethan. I'm serious. You've got potential, Luna. You're smart, you're presentable, you've got a good energy. With the right coaching, you could probably make decent money. Not like my numbers, but respectable for a woman in her first real career." Every word was a tiny explosion of condescension, but I kept my expression pleasant. Because here's something I'd learned in 8 years of climbing the corporate ladder. People reveal themselves when they think they're superior to you. Ethan's attitude toward my supposed desk job told me everything I needed to know about how he viewed women, work, and hierarchy. It told me this relationship had an expiration date. I just didn't know that the expiration date was exactly 9 days away. "I'll think about it," I said. Signaling the waiter for another glass of wine, Ethan beamed, clearly pleased with himself for offering to rescue his underachieving girlfriend from her boring administrative existence. He launched into another story about a client negotiation, and I smiled and nodded at the appropriate moments while mentally reviewing the presentation I'd be delivering the following week. The restructuring announcement was scheduled for Monday, March 18th, in the main conference room on the executive floor, a space Ethan had probably never even visited, since it required special elevator access. All affected department heads and their direct reports would be required to attend. That included Marcus Vance, the VP of Enterprise Sales, and his entire leadership team. It also included Ethan, who as a senior account executive, was considered senior enough to be briefed on organizational changes before they rolled out to the broader team. I'd seen the attendance list. His name was right there, third from the bottom. Ethan Crawford, Enterprise Sales. He had no idea he'd be sitting in that meeting, and he definitely had no idea who'd be standing at the front of the room. "Luna? Hello?" Ethan waved his hand in front of my face again. "You keep spacing out. Is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," I said, and I meant it, because in 9 days, Ethan Crawford was going to learn a very expensive lesson about assumptions, and I was going to enjoy every second of his education. The week leading up to the restructuring announcement, Felt like watching a slow-motion car crash that only I could see coming Wednesday morning. I woke up to find Ethan already in my kitchen, making himself breakfast. He'd started keeping a spare key at my apartment about 2 months ago, and lately he'd been using it more liberally than I was comfortable with. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs across the counter. "Made you breakfast. Figure you need the energy for all that. Computer work or whatever." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I'd been up until 2 in the morning on a conference call with our Seattle office, troubleshooting a vendor contract dispute that threatened to delay a major product launch. My eyes felt like sandpaper, and the last thing I needed was Ethan's cheerful condescension. "Thanks," I managed, pouring myself coffee. He checked his phone, grinning at something on the screen. Vance just texted. "We're closing the Meridian account today. $2.8 million deal. That's a $140,000 commission for me once it processes." Marcus Vance, Ethan's boss, the VP of Enterprise Sales. A 53-year-old man who wore expensive suits and cheap cologne, and who'd spent the last quarterly review meeting explaining why his team's performance issues were actually everyone else's fault. Finance was too slow with contracts. Marketing wasn't generating quality leads. Operations, my domain, wasn't providing adequate support infrastructure. I sat in that meeting, listened to him deflect responsibility for 45 minutes, and made detailed notes. Those notes were now part of a 30-page performance analysis that painted a very different picture. Enterprise Sales had every resource they'd requested, plus some they hadn't asked for. Their failure to perform was entirely internal. "That's great about the commission," I said neutrally. Ethan leaned against the counter, coffee mug in hand, looking annoyingly well-rested. "You know what's funny? Vance was saying yesterday that the company's been doing some kind of internal review. Efficiency audit or something. He said not to worry about it, that it's probably just the operations department justifying their existence." I took a slow sip of coffee to hide my expression. He said operations people love to generate busy work. Ethan continued, "Making reports nobody reads, tracking metrics that don't matter. Said they're basically corporate theater, make it look like something important is happening when really it's just bureaucrats protecting their budgets." "Interesting perspective," I said. "Right? Like, what does operations even do? No offense to your job, babe, but Vance has a point. The real value in any company is in sales and product development. Everything else is just," he waved his hand vaguely, "overhead." I set down my coffee mug with more force than intended. "Ethan, do you actually know what operations do?" He blinked, surprised by my tone. "Sure, administrative stuff. Keeping things running. Scheduling, coordination, making sure the important people have what they need." "So you think operations are basically secretarial work? I mean, it's more complex than that, obviously, but..." He shrugged. "Yeah, fundamentally it's support work. Nothing wrong with that. Every team needs support staff. Not everyone can be a revenue generator." This was the moment. I could tell him the truth right now. I could explain that operations was the backbone of the entire organization, that without strategic operations management, his sales team would drown in process failures, compliance violations, and resource misallocations. I could mention that I wasn't a support staffer, but the person who decided which departments got budget increases and which got restructured into oblivion. Instead, I said you should probably get going. Don't want to be late for that big closing. He checked his watch. "Damn, you're right. Hey, some of the guys are going out Friday night to celebrate the Meridian deal. Steakhouse downtown, probably hit some bars after. You should come. Might be good for you to see how we celebrate wins. Could be motivating. I'll check my calendar." He kissed me on the forehead like I was a child being dismissed, grabbed his suit jacket and headed out. The door clicked shut behind him, and I stood alone in my kitchen, wondering how I'd let this relationship continue for 8 months. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer Hartley, my second in command and the person I trusted most in the organization. "Jennifer. Final deck ready for your review. Also, heads up, Vance is telling his team not to worry about Monday's meeting. Says it's routine operational updates. Might want to prepare for extra drama. I texted back, let them be surprised. Documentation is airtight, Jennifer. Oh, I know. I've triple-checked everything. This is going to be legendary. Also, still can't believe you're dating one of them, and he has no idea who you are. Jennifer, are you going to tell him before Monday? I stared at that question for a long moment before responding. Where's the fun in that? Thursday afternoon, I had back-to-back meetings with department heads, walking them through their specific restructuring impacts. Some took it well, the leaders who'd been managing efficiently and could see the strategic logic. Others pushed back hard, arguing that their teams were special cases that deserved exemptions from the cuts. At 4 o'clock, Marcus Vance appeared in my doorway. I'd been expecting this. Ms. Martinez, he said, not quite masking his irritation at having to trek up to the executive floor. You have a minute? Of course. Close the door. He settled into the chair across from my desk with the posture of a man who believed he was about to set someone straight. Marcus Vance had been with Cascade Solutions for 19 years, most of it in sales, and he carried himself with the authority of someone who'd never been seriously challenged. That was about to change. I'll cut to the chase, he said. My team is concerned about this restructuring initiative. We've been hearing rumors about consolidation, budget cuts, headcount reductions. I wanted to come directly to you and make sure operations understands that enterprise sales is critical infrastructure. We can't be treated like some back-office function that can be trimmed for efficiency. I folded my hands on my desk. I appreciate you coming to me with your concerns. Good. Because frankly, and I mean this respectfully, I don't think operations fully grasps what enterprise sales does. We're relationship-based. We're managing multi-million-dollar accounts that require face time, entertainment, travel. You can't optimize that with some spreadsheet formula. I see. These efficiency reviews, they work fine for departments like HR or IT or finance. But sales are different. Sales is an art, not a science. The metrics don't tell the whole story. I pulled up a file on my computer. Actually, Marcus, the metrics tell a very clear story. Would you like to see? His eyes narrowed slightly. What metrics are you referring to? I turned my monitor so he could see the dashboard. 18 months of performance data, beautifully visualized. Revenue per employee, cost per acquisition, customer retention rates, pipeline conversion percentages. Every number is color-coded. Green for target, yellow for concern. Red for critical. Enterprise sales was a sea of red and yellow. These are your team's numbers compared to industry benchmarks and our internal mid-market team, I explained. Revenue per employee is 42% below target. Your customer acquisition costs are the highest in the company. Your expense ratio is, those numbers don't account for deal complexity, he interrupted. Enterprise deals take longer, require more resources. I've adjusted for deal size and sales cycle length, I said calmly. Even accounting for complexity, your team is underperforming, significantly. His face was reddening. With all due respect, Ms. Martinez, you're looking at this through an operational lens. You're not a sales professional. You don't understand the nuances. I understand that you've had every resource you've requested. I understand that mid-market is delivering better results with a fraction of your budget. And I understand that when I present these findings to the executive committee, they're going to ask me why we're investing so heavily in a division that's not generating proportional returns. Silence filled the room. Marcus Vance stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Are you threatening my division? He asked quietly. I'm explaining reality. Monday's meeting will outline the restructuring plan for all affected departments. I suggest you prepare your team for significant changes. He stood up, his jaw tight. This is a mistake. Sales leadership isn't going to stand for operations dictating how we run our departments. Sales leadership will implement whatever structural changes the COO approves, which he will, because I've built an airtight case backed by 18 months of data and third-party benchmark analyses. Marcus walked to the door, then paused. You know, one of my senior guys is dating someone in operations. Ethan Crawford, great kid. Real future in sales. He's always talking about how his girlfriend does some admin work here. Small world, right? My expression didn't change. Very small. I'd hate for personal relationships to complicate professional decisions. Personal relationships are irrelevant to data-driven restructuring, Marcus. If anything, they're a liability you should probably address with your team. He left without another word, and I allowed myself a small smile. 2 business days until the meeting. 2 business days until Ethan Crawford's world turned upside down. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my text thread with Jennifer. Me. Vance just made a veiled threat about my relationship with Ethan, documented in the meeting notes. Jennifer. Already done. Also, you're kind of scary when you're in full executive mode. Remind me never to underperform, me. Your numbers are excellent. You're safe, Jennifer, so... Are you sure you don't want to give Ethan a heads up? This is going to be brutal. I thought about Ethan's comments over breakfast. About Marcus. Vance calling my work corporate theater. About 8 months of being treated like an underachieving administrative assistant who couldn't possibly understand real professional pressure. Me. I'm sure. He's had plenty of opportunities to ask questions about my actual job. He chose assumptions instead. That's on him. Jennifer. Ice cold. I love it. Outside my office window, Portland was settling into evening, the city lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Ethan was probably celebrating with his team, confident in his job security, comfortable in his misconceptions. Monday was going to be educational for everyone involved, but especially for him. Friday night arrived with the inevitability of a storm you can see gathering on the horizon but can't avoid. I'd spent the day in final preparation meetings, reviewing talking points with Jennifer, coordinating with HR on the termination packages, rehearsing responses to anticipated objections. By 6 o'clock, my brain felt like overcooked pasta, and the last thing I wanted was to watch Ethan's sales team celebrate their supposed excellence at an overpriced steakhouse. But I went anyway, partly because declining would have raised questions. I wasn't ready to answer yet, mostly because I had a morbid curiosity about how these men behaved when they thought they were untouchable. The restaurant was called Prime House, one of those dimly lit establishments where the leather booths cost more than most people's cars, and the wine list requires a sommelier to translate. Ethan had texted me the address with, "Wear something nice. I want to show you off to the guys." I showed up in a simple black dress and heels, professionally appropriate but nothing flashy. When I walked in, I spotted the enterprise sales table immediately. 8 men in various stages of intoxication, ties loosened, voices too loud for the environment. Ethan saw me and waved enthusiastically. "There she is! Guys, this is Luna, my girlfriend I've been telling you about." I slid into the seat next to him as introductions went around the table. Most of the names blurred together. Brad something, Tyler something else, a Jason who looked barely old enough to drink legally. But 2 faces I recognized from the organizational charts I'd been studying for months. Derek Paulson, Senior Account Executive, 41 years old, 8 years with the company. His expense reports were legendary: $4,000 wine dinners, first-class flights to meetings that could have been handled by video call, a client relationship-building trip to Vegas that had somehow cost the company $18,000, and sitting at the head of the table, Marcus Vance himself, presiding over his team like a king holding court. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Recognition, maybe. Calculation, definitely. "Luna," he said, raising his whiskey glass slightly. "Ethan's told us so much about you. Say you work somewhere in the building? Different department?" "That's right," I said pleasantly. "I'm in operations." "Operations?" Derek Paulson laughed, already drunk. "That's like, what, scheduling conference rooms? Ordering office supplies?" The table erupted in laughter. Ethan, to his credit, looked slightly uncomfortable. "Come on, man, it's more than that." No, I'm genuinely curious," Derek interrupted, leaning forward with exaggerated interest. "What do operations actually do all day? I've always wondered." I could feel Marcus Vance watching me carefully, like he was testing something. We optimize organizational efficiency, I said simply. Identify redundancies, streamline processes, allocate resources where they'll generate the best returns. So, middle management stuff, Derek concluded, losing interest immediately. Got it. The waiter arrived with another round of drinks, and the conversation shifted to the Meridian deal they'd closed. I listened as they recounted the negotiation like it was a military campaign, each of them taking credit for different aspects of the victory. The key moment, Ethan was saying, was when I told them we'd walk away if they didn't meet our pricing. Pure bluff, but they didn't know that. Thompson, their CFO, he folded like a cheap tent. That's called reading the room, Marcus said approvingly. That's what separates great salespeople from order takers. You can't teach that instinct. It's either in your DNA or it's not. Unlike operations work, Derek added with a smirk, that's just following procedures, right? No real decision-making? I took a sip of my wine and said nothing. The dinner continued in this vein for another hour. Stories of closed deals, complaints about other departments not understanding sales, jokes about desk jockeys and paper pushers who thought they understood business strategy because they'd taken some management course. At one point, Tyler, one of the younger account executives, turned to me and asked, almost kindly, "Do you like your job, Luna? I mean, doesn't it get boring? Doing the same administrative stuff every day?" "It has its moments," I replied. "You should let Ethan train you on some sales basics," he suggested earnestly. "You've got a good presence. With the right coaching, you could probably transition into something more exciting. Make real money." Ethan beamed like a proud parent. "That's exactly what I've been telling her. She's got potential. She just needs to take some risks." Marcus Vance, who'd been quiet for several minutes, spoke up. "Career transitions can be tricky, though. Sometimes people get comfortable in their current role, even if it's beneath their capabilities. Fear of failure keeps them stuck." He was looking directly at me, and I realized he was sending a message. He knew, not the specifics maybe, but he'd figured out I was more than Ethan believed. And this was his way of rattling me, of suggesting I was in over my head. I met his gaze steadily. "Fear of failure is interesting. I find that confidence without competence is usually more dangerous. People who assume they're untouchable often don't see the cliff until they've walked right off it." The table went quiet for a beat. "Deep thoughts from operations," Derek said, breaking the tension with forced laughter. "See, this is why I could never do that job. Too much thinking, not enough doing." The conversation moved on, but Marcus kept watching me with that calculating expression. Around 9:30, the group started talking about hitting bars downtown. Ethan was fully invested in continuing the celebration, his hand on my knee, his breath smelling like expensive scotch. "You should come," he said. "It'll be fun. Plus, these guys are important connections. Could be good for your career to get to know them." I glanced around the table at these men who were about to have their division dismantled. Their team cut by 40%. Their comfortable existence shattered by a restructuring plan they'd dismissed as operational busy work. "I think I'm going to head home," I said. "Long day." Ethan's face fell. "Seriously? It's not even 10 o'clock. Some of us have work tomorrow." "It's Saturday tomorrow. Still have work." He sighed dramatically, the way someone does when they're disappointed but trying to be understanding. "This is what I'm talking about, babe. You need to learn to live a little. Take some time off, enjoy life. Work will always be there." Derek overheard this and chimed in. "She's got that employee mindset, Crawford. That's the difference between sales and support roles. We're entrepreneurs. We work when we want, play when we want. Support staff are wage slaves. Gotta clock in, clock out, follow the schedule." I stood up, gathering my purse. "Enjoy your evening, gentlemen." As I walked away from the table, I heard Marcus Vance say something that made the group laugh, but I didn't catch the words. I didn't need to. I could imagine. Outside, the Portland night air was cool and clean, washing away the suffocating atmosphere of ego and testosterone. I pulled out my phone and saw a text from Jennifer. Jennifer, how's the celebration of mediocrity going? Me, about as expected. They're all convinced they're masters of the universe. Jennifer, Monday is going to be savage. Me, Monday is going to be necessary. I walked toward my car, heels clicking on the sidewalk, and allowed myself to think about what was coming. In 63 hours, I would stand in front of that conference room and deliver news that would fundamentally alter the professional lives of everyone. At that dinner table, some of them would land on their feet, the ones who were actually good at their jobs, who'd been carrying the weight while others coasted. Derek Paulson wouldn't be one of them. His performance metrics were abysmal, and his expense reports were going to be case studies in what not to do. Ethan was harder to predict. His numbers were decent, but not exceptional. He was in the middle of the pack, which meant his fate would depend on factors beyond raw performance, adaptability, attitude, potential for growth, and whether his boss decided to protect him or use him as a sacrifice to save others. I reached my car and sat in the driver's seat for a moment, not starting the engine, just thinking. There was still time to tell him. I could text him right now, ask him to meet me somewhere private, explain everything before Monday's meeting. It would be the kind thing to do, the compassionate choice. But Ethan had spent 8 months assuming I was less than him. 8 months of subtle condescension, of head pats and oversimplifications, of treating my intelligence like a party trick rather than professional capability. He'd had countless opportunities to ask real questions about my work, to show genuine curiosity about my life, to see me as a complete person rather than a supporting character in his success story. He'd chosen not to. So I started the car and drove home, leaving Ethan to his celebration. Monday morning would arrive soon enough, and with it, the education he'd never bothered to pursue voluntarily. Back at my apartment, I made tea and opened my laptop one final time, reviewing the presentation deck. Every slide was perfect. Every data point was verified. Every recommendation was defensible. This wasn't personal revenge, this was business. But if business happened to teach Ethan Crawford a lesson about assumptions and respect, well, that was just a pleasant side effect of organizational efficiency. Saturday morning, I woke to 17 missed calls from Ethan. My phone had been on silent since I'd gotten home from the steakhouse, and apparently he'd been trying to reach me since midnight. The voicemails progressed from cheerfully drunk to confused to borderline irritated. Hey babe, where'd you go? We're at this place called Vault. You should come back. Luna? You okay? Text me back. Seriously, it's rude to just leave without saying goodbye to everyone. The final message, timestamped at 1:47 a.m. Whatever. I guess you're just not a night person. We'll talk tomorrow. I deleted them all and made coffee. My phone rang again at 9:15. Ethan, naturally. Hey, I answered. Finally. I've been trying to reach you all night. Where did you go? Home. Like I said I was going to. Yeah, but you didn't even say goodbye to the guys. Marcus noticed. It looked bad. I paused mid-pour with the coffee pot. It looked bad? Yeah, like, these are important people in my career, Luna. First impressions matter. They're going to think my girlfriend is antisocial or stuck up or something. I'm sure they'll survive the disappointment. Why are you being like this? He sounded genuinely confused, like he couldn't fathom why I might be less than enthusiastic about spending my evening with men who'd spent 2 hours belittling my profession. I'm not being like anything. I'm drinking coffee on a Saturday morning. Look, I know that crowd can be a little intense, but they're good guys once you get to know them. And it's important to me that you make an effort with my work friends. Your work friends spent the entire dinner explaining why operations, personnel are basically glorified, secretaries. Silence on the other end. Then they were just joking around. That's how guys talk. You can't take everything so seriously. Right, just locker room talk. Exactly. See, you get it. So listen, I'm thinking we should do something today. Maybe go hiking, clear our heads, get some fresh air. You've been stressed about work lately, probably all those emails and scheduling conflicts or whatever. And I think you need to relax. I took a long sip of coffee. looking out my apartment window at the gray Portland sky. Rain was coming. I could feel it in the air. I can't today, Ethan. I have work to finish. It's Saturday. I'm aware of what day it is. Come on, Luna. This is what I'm talking about. You let work consume you. It's not healthy. Your boss is probably some middle manager type who doesn't respect boundaries. And you're too much of a people pleaser to push back. My boss respects my time just fine. Then why are you working on a weekend? Because on Monday morning, I'm restructuring the entire Western region, and I need everything to be perfect, I didn't say. Because I'm about to deliver news that will affect hundreds of lives, and I'm not going to do it half-assed. I didn't say. Because unlike your team, I actually take professional responsibility seriously, I didn't say. Instead, big project. Deadline Monday. He sighed, the put-upon sound of someone dealing with an unreasonable person. Fine, but tomorrow we're doing something. No excuses. You need to learn work-life balance. We'll see. Luna. I have to go. Ethan. I'll call you later. I hung up before he could respond and silenced my phone completely. The rest of Saturday disappeared into final preparations. I video-conferenced with our COO, Richard Brennan, who'd been the driving force behind the restructuring initiative. Richard was 62, sharp as a scalpel, and had zero patience for organizational inefficiency. Are you ready for Monday? He asked, his face filling my laptop screen. The deck is finalized. HR has all the documentation. Severance packages are prepared. Security has been briefed on badge deactivations. How do you think Vance will react? Publicly? Professional acceptance. Privately? He'll fight every recommendation and try to protect his entire team. Richard smiled thinly. He already called me Thursday afternoon. Spent 30 minutes explaining why enterprise sales is too critical to restructure. Used words like strategic and irreplaceable about 17 times. What did you tell him? That I'd review the data and make my decision based on objective analysis. Which I did. Your recommendations are approved, Luna. All of them, including the 40% headcount reduction and the management consolidation. My heart rate kicked up a notch. Having my proposals approved was expected. I'd built an ironclad case. But hearing the final confirmation made it real. Marcus isn't going to take this well, I said. Marcus has been skating by on relationships and tenure for too long. The board wants results, not excuses. If he can't adapt, he can leave. We spent another hour discussing implementation logistics, potential legal challenges, and communication strategies. By the time we disconnected, rain was hammering against my windows and my shoulders felt like concrete. I ordered takeout, ate it mechanically while reviewing my notes, and fell asleep on my couch with my laptop still open. Sunday morning brought texts from Ethan demanding we spend the day together. I compromised by agreeing to lunch, mostly because I needed to see him one more time before Monday shattered whatever this relationship was. We met at a cafe in the Pearl District, one of those exposed brick places with overpriced avocado toast and baristas who take their coffee art very seriously. Ethan was already there when I arrived, looking annoyingly refreshed despite Friday night's drinking. He stood and kissed me, then gestured to the chair across from him like he was granting an audience. "You look tired," he said as I sat down. "Long weekend working." See, this is the problem with operations roles. They don't respect your time. You need to set boundaries. I ordered a latte from the hovering waiter and turned back to Ethan. Tell me something. What do you think I actually do at work? He blinked, surprised by the question. What do you mean? You've told me. Operations stuff, coordinating things, managing schedules, helping departments communicate. Be specific. What do you think my typical day looks like? He shifted uncomfortably. I don't know, Luna. Why does it matter? You show up, you do your tasks, you go home. Same as anyone with a regular job? And you think your job is different? My job is different. I'm revenue generating. I'm in the arena every day, competing, winning deals. There's direct accountability. If I don't perform, I don't eat. But you do perform. He smiled, some of his confidence returning. Damn right I do. Closed 3 major deals this quarter. My commission check is going to be insane. What's your quota attainment? My what? Your quota, the target your company sets for your annual sales. What percentage have you hit? He frowned. I don't know the exact number, but I'm doing fine. Vance says I'm one of his top performers. I sipped my latte, processing this. Ethan genuinely didn't know his own performance metrics. He was operating on vibes and his boss's vague affirmations rather than actual data. Ethan, do you know what happens when a company restructures? Sure, they cut fat, eliminate redundancies. Usually hits departments like HR and operations first, no offense, because they're overhead rather than core business. And you think sales never gets restructured? Not successful sales teams. You don't kill your revenue generators. That would be idiotic. The waiter arrived with food I didn't remember ordering. Ethan launched into a story about a prospect meeting he had scheduled for Tuesday, talking strategy and relationship-building techniques, utterly confident in his professional immortality. I watched him talk and felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was observing our relationship from outside my body. This man had been sharing my bed for 8 months and I barely knew him. Not because he was mysterious or guarded, but because he'd never been curious enough to reveal himself beyond the surface. He'd never asked about my goals, my challenges, my actual daily experience. He'd constructed an entire fantasy about who I was based on the flimsiest evidence, and then fallen in love with his own imagination. Are you even listening? Ethan asked, waving a hand in front of my face. Sorry. Distracted. You're always distracted lately. Is everything okay? Is your boss giving you a hard time? My boss is fine. Because if someone at work is making things difficult, I could talk to some people. Cascade Solutions isn't that big. I probably know someone who knows someone. Could put in a good word for you. Help you transfer to a better department. That's really not necessary. I'm serious, Luna. You don't have to be stuck in a dead-end role. You've got options. Hell, if you wanted to leave entirely, I'm making enough now that you could take some time, figure out what you actually want to do. Maybe go back to school? There it was. The ultimate expression of his perception. I was someone who needed rescuing from my inadequate career by his superior earning power. Ethan, I said carefully, what if I told you I like my job? That I'm actually good at it? I'm sure you're great at it. But being great at something doesn't mean it's the right fit. You're smart. You're capable. You could do something with more impact. More prestige. Well, yeah, no offense, but operations isn't exactly a glamorous field. It's important, sure, but it's behind-the-scenes stuff. You could be front and center somewhere. Use your potential. I set down my coffee cup and looked at him directly. What if I'm already front and center? What do you mean? This was the moment. I could tell him everything right now. Prepare him for tomorrow, give him a chance to process before the meeting, maybe salvage something from the wreckage of his assumptions. But looking at his confident, slightly condescending expression, I couldn't do it. He'd earned this lesson the hard way. Nothing, I said. Just thinking out loud. We finished lunch making shallow conversation about his upcoming week, my supposed project deadline, plans for the following weekend. All of it felt performative, like we were actors reciting lines from a script neither of us believed in anymore. When we parted ways outside the cafe, Ethan kissed me and said, "Try to relax tonight, okay? Your project will be fine. It's just work." Just work, I echoed. He walked away toward his car, checking his phone, completely unaware that in approximately 16 hours, his entire professional world was going to implode, and I would be the one holding the detonator. I walked back to my apartment through the misty rain, my mind already shifting into Monday mode. Tomorrow wasn't about Ethan, wasn't about our doomed relationship, wasn't even about Marcus Vance and his inflated ego. Tomorrow was about organizational excellence, about making hard decisions that positioned the company for sustainable growth, about proving that operations weren't just support staff, but strategic leadership. Everything else was just collateral damage. Monday morning arrived with crystalline clarity. No rain, no fog. Just sharp March sunlight cutting through my office windows as I prepared for the most important presentation of my career. I dressed deliberately. Navy suit from Theory, white silk blouse, heels that added 3 inches to my height. Professional armor. My hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, minimal jewelry, makeup precise and understated. I looked exactly like what I was. An executive about to deliver news that would reshape an organization. Jennifer arrived at my office at 7:30 with final copies of the presentation materials and a large coffee. "Ready for this?" she asked, setting everything on my desk. "Been ready for months. Security is briefed. HR is standing by? Legal reviewed everything over the weekend and signed off. Richard will be in the room for support but wants you to lead the entire presentation." "Good. And..." Jennifer hesitated. "Ethan Crawford is confirmed on the attendance list. 3rd row, middle seat." I nodded slowly, saying nothing. "Luna, are you sure you don't want to?" "I'm sure." She studied my face for a moment, then smiled. "Okay, let's go change some lives." The conference room on the executive floor was called the Cascade Room, and it was designed for exactly this kind of meeting. Large enough to hold 70 people, equipped with state-of-the-art presentation technology, positioned with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked downtown Portland. Power architecture. By 8:15, attendees were filing in. Department heads, senior managers, high-performing individual contributors from across the Western region. All of them were required to attend. None of them knew exactly why, except that the meeting was labeled Strategic Restructuring Initiative, Implementation Phase. I stood at the front of the room with Jennifer, organizing materials, my back to the arriving crowd. I could hear the murmur of confused conversations, people greeting each other, speculation about what this was all about. I heard they're announcing promotions, someone said. "No, it's definitely about the new Seattle expansion," another voice countered. "Vance told us it was routine operational updates," a third voice added, and I recognized it. Derek Paulson. I didn't turn around. At 8:20, I heard Ethan's voice. "Anyone know what this is about? I've got a client call at 10 I need to prepare for." "No idea," another enterprise sales rep responded. "Vance said not to worry about it." At 8:25, Marcus Vance himself entered with his leadership team. I caught his reflection in the window glass. He spotted me at the front of the room and stopped mid-stride. For just a second, his confident expression faltered. He knew, maybe not the details. But he understood enough to be worried. At 8:28, Richard Brennan, our COO, entered and took a seat in the front row. His presence sent a ripple through the room. Executive leadership rarely attended departmental meetings. At 8:30 exactly, I turned around to face the room. The conversations died in waves as people registered who were standing at the front. I watched recognition and confusion play across different faces. Some people knew me by sight. Others had only heard my name in emails and organizational charts. And then I found Ethan. 3rd row, middle seat, exactly where the attendance list said he'd be. He was scrolling through his phone, not even looking up yet, completely unaware that his girlfriend was standing 20 feet away, about to deliver the most important presentation in the room. "Good morning," I said, my voice clear and carrying. "Thank you all for being here. I know you all have busy schedules, so I appreciate your time." Ethan's head snapped up at the sound of my voice. I watched his face cycle through expressions: confusion, recognition, disbelief, then a kind of frozen shock that made his eyes go wide and his mouth open slightly. Around him, other members of the enterprise sales team were having similar reactions, particularly those who'd been at Friday night's dinner. Derek Paulson looked like he'd been slapped. Tyler had gone pale. Marcus Vance, to his credit, kept his expression neutral. But his hands were gripping the armrests of his chair like he was bracing for impact. "For those who don't know me," I continued, my eyes sweeping the room but deliberately skipping over Ethan, "I'm Luna Martinez, Director of Operations for the Western Region. I report directly to Richard Brennan, our COO, and I've been with Cascade Solutions for 7 years. I clicked to the first slide, my professional headshot, my title, my credentials. Master's degree in Operations Management from Stanford. Previous role as Senior Operations Manager at a Fortune 500 tech company, Multiple industry awards for operational excellence. Ethan looked like he might be sick. For the past 6 months, I continued, I've been leading a comprehensive analysis of our organizational structure, resource allocation, and performance metrics across all Western Region departments. This analysis was commissioned by executive leadership in response to investor concerns about our efficiency ratios and operational costs. Click. Next slide, a heat map of the entire Western Region, color-coded by performance metrics. What we found was a mixed picture. Some departments are operating at exceptional levels, meeting or exceeding targets while maintaining lean cost structures. Other departments are significantly underperforming, missing targets while consuming disproportionate resources. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Today's meeting is to present our findings and outline the restructuring plan that will be implemented over the next 90 days. Click. A slide showing the methodology, 18 months of data, third-party benchmark analyses, industry comparisons, predictive modeling. I want to be clear about something from the start, I said, making eye contact with people throughout the room. This restructuring is not punitive. It's strategic. Our goal is to position Cascade Solutions for sustainable growth by optimizing resources and eliminating inefficiencies. Some departments will see expansions and increased investment. Others will see consolidation and workforce reductions. The room was dead silent now. Even the people who'd walked in confidently were starting to look nervous. I spent the next 20 minutes walking through the analysis department by department. Product development, expanding by 15%, adding new positions in emerging technologies. Mid-market sales, adding resources, promoting the director to VP level. Customer success, restructuring management but maintaining headcount. IT infrastructure, consolidating with our partner office in Sacramento. With each department, I showed the data that drove the decisions. Performance metrics, cost analyses, growth projections, everything objective, everything defensible. And then I reached the slide everyone in enterprise sales had been dreading. Enterprise sales, I said, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Click. A comprehensive dashboard of enterprise sales metrics, all the red and yellow indicators I'd shown Marcus Vance in my office. Over the past 18 months, enterprise sales has consistently underperformed across multiple dimensions. Revenue per employee is 42% below target. Customer acquisition costs are the highest in the company at $47,000 per new client. Compared to mid-market's $12,000, sales cycle duration has increased by 38%. Customer retention in accounts managed by enterprise sales is declining. I watched Marcus Vance's jaw tighten. Meanwhile, operational expenses for enterprise sales have increased by 61% over the same period. Travel and entertainment costs alone have doubled. The department currently employs 32 people and consumes 23% of the total Western Region budget while generating only 11% of revenue. Click. A comparison chart showing enterprise sales performance versus mid-market, sales and industry benchmarks. The disparity was stark, undeniable. Based on this analysis, we are implementing the following changes to enterprise sales. Effective immediately, I could feel Ethan's eyes boring into me, but I kept my focus on the slides, on the data, on the professional responsibility I had to execute this correctly. First, enterprise sales and mid-market sales will be consolidated into a single strategic sales division under new leadership. Marcus Vance will be transitioning to an advisory role. Marcus stood up abruptly. This is Marcus. Richard Brennan's voice cut through the room like a knife. Sit down. You'll have time for questions after the presentation. Marcus sat, his face flushed with anger. Second, I continued, the combined strategic sales division will be reduced from 53 total positions to 37. All affected employees will be notified individually by end of business today and will receive severance packages in accordance with company policy. People were whispering now, nervous energy crackling through the room. Third, Expense policies for the strategic sales division will be aligned with company-wide standards. All travel and entertainment expenses will require approval above a certain threshold and will be audited quarterly. I click to the next slide. The new organizational structure. Reporting lines, role definitions. The goal of this restructuring is to create a unified, efficient sales organization that combines the relationship-building strengths of enterprise sales with the performance-driven culture of mid-market sales. We believe this will position us to exceed our revenue targets while reducing operational costs by approximately 32%. I walked through additional details, timeline, transition support, resources available for affected employees. Throughout it all, I remained professional, clear, unshakable. When I finally finished and opened the floor for questions, the room erupted. How are termination decisions being made? What about commission on pending deals? Who's leading the new division? I answered each question methodically, with Jennifer providing supporting documentation. Richard Brennan added context about the executive decision-making process. HR representatives explained the logistics of the transition. Through it all, Ethan sat frozen in his seat, staring at me like I was a stranger wearing his girlfriend's face. Marcus Vance asked pointed questions about the data methodology, trying to poke holes in my analysis. I calmly addressed each concern with additional evidence, third-party validation, and industry expert consultations. By the time I finished responding, even he had no rebuttal. The meeting finally ended at 10:15, nearly 2 hours after it started. People filed out in clusters, some shell-shocked, others angry, a few looking relieved that their departments had been spared. The enterprise sales team left together, a tight group of men whose world had just collapsed. Marcus led them out with rigid posture and a face like stone. Ethan was the last of them to leave. He stood slowly, gathering his things with mechanical movements, then finally looked directly at me. Our eyes met across the room. I saw betrayal there. Shock, confusion, anger. But mostly, I saw the dawning realization that he'd spent 8 months dating someone he'd never actually known at all. He walked out without saying a word, and I let him go. The conference room emptied, leaving just me, Jennifer, and Richard Brennan surrounded by the debris of organizational upheaval. Empty coffee cups, discarded handouts, the lingering tension of 70 people processing career-altering news. That went as well as could be expected, Richard said, gathering his materials. Marcus will file a formal complaint with HR by the end of day, but he doesn't have a leg to stand on. Your analysis is bulletproof. Thank you. The board is meeting Wednesday to review the implementation timeline. They'll want you there to present. He paused at the doorway. You did excellent work, Luna. This restructuring will save the company approximately $8.3 million annually while improving performance metrics. That's the kind of strategic thinking that gets people promoted to VP. He left, and the weight of his words settled over me. VP of Operations. It's what I'd been working toward for 3 years. And I'd just cleared the biggest hurdle standing between me and that goal. So why did I feel so hollow? Your phone has been vibrating nonstop for the past 20 minutes, Jennifer said quietly, nodding toward my bag. I pulled it out. 17 missed calls from Ethan, 23 text messages. The preview lines visible on my lock screen. We need to talk. What the hell was that? You lied to me. How could you not tell me? Call me back right now. I silenced the phone and put it away. You're going to have to deal with that eventually, Jennifer said. I know. Want me to run interference? No, this is mine to handle. We spent the next hour with HR, reviewing the list of affected employees and scheduling individual notification meetings. 16 people from enterprise sales would be terminated. Another 8 would be reassigned to different roles with adjusted compensation. The rest would be absorbed into the new strategic sales structure. Ethan Crawford's name was in the 3rd category, retained, but demoted from senior account executive to account executive, with a corresponding 20% reduction in base salary and adjusted commission structure. Not fired. but definitely not unscathed. He'll be notified at 2 o'clock, the HR director said. Standard protocol. His direct manager will deliver the news. HR will be present, and he'll have the option to accept the new role or take a severance package. Understood. Given your personal connection, I should ask if you want to recuse yourself from any decisions related to Mr. Crawford's employment. I'd been expecting this question. My personal relationship doesn't change the data. His performance metrics put him in the middle of the pack. In a 40% reduction, middle performers get reassigned or downgraded. If I gave him preferential treatment, it would undermine the entire restructuring. The HR director nodded approvingly. Just needed to document that for our records. By noon, I was back in my office, staring at a lunch I couldn't eat and a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. Ethan had moved from texts to voicemails, his tone escalating from confusion to anger. Luna, I don't understand what just happened. You're the director of operations? Since when? Why didn't you tell me? Call me back. This is insane. 8 months and you never once mentioned you were some high-level executive? What else have you been lying about? You just destroyed my entire division and you couldn't give me a heads up? That's cold, Luna. That's really fucking cold. The last voicemail was quieter, almost hurt. I thought we had something real. I thought you trusted me. I guess I was wrong about everything. I deleted them all and forced myself to eat half a sandwich while reviewing emails. The company-wide announcement had gone out, and my inbox was flooding with messages. Congratulations from peers, questions from department heads, a tersely professional email from Marcus Vance requesting a meeting to discuss irregularities in the performance data. At 1:45, my office door burst open. Ethan stood in the doorway, breathing hard like he'd run up 7 flights of stairs. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled, his eyes wild with emotion. "We need to talk," he said. I stood slowly. "Ethan, you can't be here. This is the executive floor. You need special clearance. I don't give a damn about clearance." His voice was loud enough that people in neighboring offices probably heard. "You owe me an explanation." "Lower your voice. Don't tell me what to do." "You don't get to—" He stopped, seeming to realize where he was, how he was acting. He took a breath and closed the door behind him. "Please, just explain this to me. Make it make sense." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat, and I returned to my own chair, maintaining the physical barrier of the desk between us. "What do you want to know?" I asked. "Everything. Start with how you're the director of operations, and I've been dating you for 8 months without knowing." "You never asked." "I never—" He stared at me incredulously. "I asked what you did." "You said you worked in operations." "Which is true. You let me believe you were some low-level employee. I let you believe what you wanted to believe, Ethan. You made assumptions based on stereotypes and I didn't correct them. That's not the same as lying. It's lying by omission." "Is it?" "Because I remember asking you questions about your work, trying to understand your role, your responsibilities, and you answered. You talked about your job all the time, your deals, your challenges, your goals. But you never once asked me the same questions. You never asked what my typical day looked like, what projects I was working on, who I reported to, what my career aspirations were." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. "Because he couldn't deny it. Every time I tried to talk about my work, you'd glaze over or change the subject," I continued. "You'd pat me on the head, metaphorically speaking, and redirect to something you found more interesting, which was usually you. That's not fair, isn't it? Last week you offered to help me transition into an entry-level sales role because you thought I had potential. 2 weeks ago, you suggested I could quit my desk job and take some time to figure out what I really wanted to do with my life. You've spent 8 months treating me like an underachieving child who needed career guidance from her successful boyfriend." His face was flushing red. "Because you never told me otherwise. You deliberately hid who you were. I was myself the entire time. You just never bothered to see it." Silence filled the office. Outside my window, Portland stretched out in afternoon sunlight. indifferent to the drama unfolding in this room. "You're restructuring my division," Ethan said finally, his voice quieter. "You're cutting 40% of the team. Did you know you were going to do that when we started dating?" The restructuring initiative was commissioned 4 months into our relationship. I didn't know the specific outcomes until about 6 weeks ago. "And you didn't think to warn me?" "Warn you of what? That your division was underperforming?" "The data was available to anyone who bothered to look at it. That there might be organizational changes? That's always a possibility in any company. That you should maybe pay attention to your actual performance metrics instead of relying on Marcus Vance's empty praise?" "So, this is my fault?" "This is nobody's fault, Ethan. It's business. Your division was inefficient and underperforming. The company made strategic decisions to optimize resources. That's how organizations function." He laughed bitterly. "God, listen to yourself. You sound like a robot. These are people's lives, Luna. My life, my career. Doesn't that matter to you at all?" "Of course it matters. Which is why I spent 6 months building a restructuring plan that's fair, data-driven, and includes robust support for affected employees. Every person who's being terminated gets a generous severance package, outplacement services, and extended health benefits. Every person who's being reassigned gets training and support for their new role. This isn't a vindictive purge. It's necessary organizational evolution." "I'm being demoted," he said flatly. 20% pay cut. They're telling me at 2 o'clock, but word travels fast. Derek Paulson is being fired outright. Tyler, Jason, half the people I work with every day, gone. And you just stood up there and delivered that news like you were reading a grocery list. Would you have preferred I cry? Get emotional? That wouldn't have changed anything except to make me look unprofessional and undermine my authority. I would have preferred you to give me a heads up. I would have preferred you to trust me enough to tell me what was coming." "So you could do what, exactly? Prepare? Warn Marcus? Try to sabotage the restructuring? Game the system somehow?" He flinched. "I would never—" "Wouldn't you? Be honest, Ethan. If I'd told you 2 weeks ago that enterprise sales was being gutted, what would you have done?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. "The restructuring had to be confidential until implementation," I said. "That's standard practice. If you'd been dating the director of operations at any other company going through reorganization, you still wouldn't have gotten advance warning. The only difference is you would have known your girlfriend was capable of making those kinds of decisions." "This is insane," he muttered, running his hands through his hair. "I don't even know who you are." "I'm the same person I've always been. You just finally know what I do for a living." "No. The Luna I was dating was. She was sweet and uncomplicated, and she didn't have the power to destroy people's careers. The Luna you were dating was a fantasy, Ethan. A convenient fiction you created because it made you feel superior. You wanted a girlfriend who thought you were impressive, who'd be awed by your sales stories, who'd make you feel like the successful one in the relationship. The real me didn't fit that narrative, so you ignored everything that contradicted your assumptions." He stood abruptly. "I can't do this right now. I have a meeting in 15 minutes where I'm getting officially demoted, and I need to figure out whether to take the new role or quit entirely." "That's your decision to make." He walked to the door, then turned back. "Was any of it real? Us, I mean. Or was I just some kind of social experiment for you?" The question hung in the air, and for the first time in the conversation, I felt something crack in my professional armor. "It was real," I said quietly. "At first. I wanted it to be real. But somewhere along the way, I realized you didn't actually see me. You saw a reflection of your own expectations. And I stopped trying to show you anything different, because what was the point? The point was we were in a relationship. Relationships are built on honesty. You're right. They are. Which is why this one is over." He stared at me for a long moment, his expression cycling through anger, hurt, and finally something like resignation. "Yeah," he said. "I guess it is." He left, pulling the door closed behind him with a soft click that felt more final than any slammed door could have. I sat alone in my office, surrounded by the trappings of professional success, and felt the full weight of what I'd just done. Not the restructuring, that was right, necessary, defensible, but the relationship, the 8 months of calculated distance, the choice to let Ethan's misconceptions stand unchallenged because some petty part of me enjoyed watching him underestimate me. Jennifer knocked and entered. "You okay?" Professional victory, personal disaster, the usual executive trade-off. She sat down across from me. "For what it's worth, he had every opportunity to actually get to know you. He chose not to. That's on him. I know. And the restructuring was the right call. The company needed this. Your career needed this. I know that too. But?" I looked out the window at the city below, all those lives unfolding in buildings and streets, people making choices and living with consequences. But winning doesn't always feel like winning. Jennifer nodded and didn't try to argue, because she understood what I was learning in real time, that you could make all the right professional decisions, build an impeccable case, execute flawlessly, and still lose something valuable in the process. The question was whether what I'd gained was worth what I'd sacrificed. I'd find out soon enough. 3 months later, I stood in the same conference room where I'd delivered the restructuring presentation, but the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. The Cascade Room was decorated for celebration. Catering tables lined one wall, champagne flutes caught the afternoon light, and clusters of employees mingled in the relaxed way people do when good news has just been delivered. The restructuring had exceeded every projection. Strategic sales, the merged division, was up 37% in revenue. Operational costs had dropped by $9.2 million. Customer satisfaction scores had improved across the board. The metrics that had been hemorrhaging red were now solidly green. And I'd just been promoted to Vice President of Operations for the entire company, not just the Western region. At 33, I was the youngest VP in Cascade Solutions history. "Speech! Speech!" someone called out, and the room quieted as people turned toward me. I raised my glass slightly, acknowledging the attention. "I'll keep this brief because I know you all have actual work to do, unlike VPs, who apparently just stand around taking credit for other people's efforts." Laughter rippled through the room. "The restructuring we implemented 3 months ago was difficult," I continued, my tone shifting to something more serious. "Change always is. People lost jobs. Teams were disrupted. Comfortable patterns were broken. But the results speak for themselves. This organization is stronger, more efficient, and better positioned for growth than we were a year ago." I paused, looking around the room at familiar faces. Department heads who'd trusted my analysis, employees who'd adapted to new roles, the HR team that had handled hundreds of difficult conversations with grace. Success like this isn't built by one person. It's built by teams willing to embrace change, leaders willing to make hard decisions, and individuals willing to challenge themselves to perform at higher levels. Thank you all for making this work. More applause, genuine this time, and then the room returned to celebration mode. Jennifer appeared at my elbow with a fresh glass of champagne. "Gracious in victory," she said. "Very VP of you." I practiced in the mirror. "Liar. You're naturally good at this and you know it." She clinked her glass against mine. "Congratulations, Luna. You earned this." "We earned this. You're getting promoted too, Director of Operations for Western Region. It's official as of next Monday." Her eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Richard signed off this morning." "You've been doing half my job for the past year anyway. Might as well get paid for it." She looked like she might cry, then laughed instead and pulled me into a quick hug. "Thank you. I won't let you down." "I know you won't." As Jennifer went off, To process her own good news, I found myself scanning the room out of habit, cataloging who was here and who wasn't. Most of the strategic sales team had shown up, the ones who'd survived the restructuring and were now thriving under new leadership. Derek Paulson wasn't here, obviously. He'd been terminated and had apparently taken a job with a competitor in Phoenix. Marcus Vance wasn't here either. He'd accepted an early retirement package and was rumored to be consulting, which usually meant golfing and trying to stay relevant. And Ethan Crawford wasn't here. I hadn't seen him since that confrontation in my office 3 months ago. He'd taken the demotion rather than the severance, which surprised me. I'd expected his pride to demand he quit. But according to Jennifer's intelligence network, he'd been keeping his head down, hitting his numbers, and apparently trying to rebuild his reputation from the ground up. We hadn't spoken, hadn't texted, hadn't acknowledged each other's existence in any way. The relationship had ended exactly as messily as I'd known it would. And I'd spent the past 3 months telling myself I didn't care. I was mostly successful at believing it. Luna Martinez, a voice said behind me, and I turned to find Richard Brennan with a woman I didn't recognize. Mid-50s, expensive suit, the kind of presence that suggested serious authority. "Richard," I said, shaking his hand, "I want you to meet Diane Chen. She's on our board of directors and chairs the compensation committee." We shook hands, her grip firm and assessing. "I've been reviewing your work," Diane said without preamble. The restructuring analysis was impressive. But what really caught my attention was the implementation. You delivered results ahead of schedule and under budget while maintaining employee morale. That's rare. Thank you. The board is planning a significant expansion into the Southwest region over the next 2 years. We'll need someone to architect the operational infrastructure. Richard suggested you might be interested in leading that initiative. My heart rate kicked up. Southwest expansion meant Phoenix, Las Vegas, Albuquerque, massive markets with huge growth potential. It also meant another promotion, more responsibility, and positioning myself for C-suite consideration by age 35. I'd be very interested, I said carefully. Good. We'll talk specifics next month. For now, enjoy your promotion. You've earned it. Diane moved off to talk to other executives and Richard lingered for a moment. She's right, you know, he said quietly. You did earn this, but I hope you're taking care of yourself too. This job can consume you if you let it. I'm fine. You're excellent at your job. Luna, just make sure you're building a life outside of it too. He walked away before I could respond, leaving me with the uncomfortable feeling that he'd seen something I was trying to hide. The truth was, I'd thrown myself into work with single-minded intensity over the past 3 months. 16-hour days were standard. Weekends at the office were routine. I'd reviewed every detail of the restructuring implementation personally, troubleshoot problems in real time, and made myself available to affected employees around the clock. It was easier than thinking about what I'd lost. The celebration wound down around 5:30. I stayed to help with cleanup despite Jennifer's protests that VPs didn't bus tables, then finally headed back to my office to collect my things. My new office. Technically, they'd moved me to a larger space on the executive floor with better views and more square footage. Corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, custom furniture, a private bathroom. All the trappings of success. I sat at my new desk and opened my laptop to check emails one final time before heading home. 743 unread messages. I started triaging them mechanically, sorting by priority, flagging items for follow-up. A knock on my doorframe made me look up. Ethan stood there, and my breath caught. He looked different. Thinner, maybe. Tired around the eyes. His suit was less expensive than the ones he used to wear, and his hair was cut shorter, more conservative. He looked like someone who'd been humbled by life and was still figuring out how to stand up straight again. "Hi," he said. "Hi. I heard about your promotion. Congratulations. Thank you. I heard you're doing well with the new structure." "I'm surviving." He stepped into the office but didn't sit. just stood awkwardly near the door like he wasn't sure he had permission to be there. I wanted to talk to you. I know I should have reached out sooner, but I needed time to process everything. It's fine. You don't owe me anything. Actually, I do. I owe you an apology. I closed my laptop and gave him my full attention. I've spent the past 3 months thinking about what happened, Ethan said. About what you said in this office. That I never really saw you. And you were right. I created this entire fantasy about who you were based on almost no evidence, and then I got angry at you for not living up to my imagination. Ethan, let me finish, please. He took a breath. I've been in therapy. My therapist pointed out some patterns in how I relate to women, how I need to feel superior to feel secure. It wasn't pretty to hear, but it was true. And with you, I think part of me knew you were more than I was admitting. There were signs, but acknowledging them would have meant dealing with my own insecurities, so I just ignored them. I didn't know what to say to that level of self-awareness. The demotion was a wake-up call, he continued. Suddenly, I wasn't the hotshot senior exec anymore. I was just another account executive grinding it out, and I had to face the fact that I'd been coasting on Marcus Vance's favoritism instead of actually excelling at my job. So I've been working on that. My numbers are good now, actually good. Not just good for Marcus's team good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm not telling you this because I want to get back together, he said quickly. I know that ship has sailed. I'm telling you because you deserved better than what I gave you. And I wanted you to know that I finally understand that. Silence stretched between us. But it was different from the tense silence of 3 months ago. This felt like closure. I appreciate you saying that, I said finally. And for what it's worth, I wasn't entirely innocent either. I could have been more direct. I chose to let you believe what you wanted to believe because it was easier than having difficult conversations. Maybe, but I should have asked better questions. I should have been curious about who you actually were instead of satisfied with my assumptions. He shifted his weight. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. And congratulations again to the VP. You're going to be amazing at it. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Luna? Thank you. For what? For not firing me. I know I was in the middle of the pack performance-wise. You could have cut me, and no one would have questioned it. But you didn't. You gave me a chance to prove myself. I won't waste it. He left before I could respond. And I sat alone in my corner office processing the conversation. 3 months ago, I'd thought I understood the cost of the restructuring. Professional relationships strained. Personal relationships destroyed. The weight of decisions that affected hundreds of lives. But I was only now beginning to understand the more subtle costs. The parts of myself I'd had to close off to make those decisions. The relationships I'd sacrificed on the altar of career advancement. The nagging question of whether success at this level required becoming someone I wasn't sure I wanted to be. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Drinks to celebrate? My treat. I looked at the 743 unread emails, thought about the Southwest expansion project, and considered the 16-hour days stretching ahead of me. Then I closed my laptop. Absolutely, I texted back. I'll meet you in 20 minutes. Because Richard was right. I needed to build a life outside of work. I needed friends, relationships, experiences that had nothing to do with operational efficiency or strategic restructuring. I needed to be Luna Martinez the person, not just Luna Martinez the vice president. As I gathered my things and headed for the elevator, I caught my reflection in the office windows, professional, successful, powerful. Everything I'd worked for, but also alone. The restructuring had taught Ethan Crawford a lesson about assumptions and respect. But it had taught me something too, that you could win every professional battle and still lose something important in the process. That power without connection was hollow. That being right wasn't the same as being happy. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, descending from the executive floor toward the street level where Jennifer was waiting. I'd made it to VP at 33. I'd proven I could make hard decisions and deliver results. I'd earned respect, authority, and a career trajectory that most people only dreamed about. Now I just had to figure out what else I wanted from life besides success. And maybe, just maybe, learn to ask better questions of myself and of the people around me. Because if the past 3 months had taught me anything, it was this. Assumptions didn't just hurt the people you underestimated, they hurt you too. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened and I stepped out into the Portland evening. Behind me, the executive floor and all its power. Ahead of me, possibility. I chose ahead. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.